The late James Yule was one of the most inspirational call makers of his time, and the impacts he has had in the call making and woodworking communities can still be felt to this day. He was someone that inspired many of today's legendary decorative call makers, and he could be considered by some to be the grandfather of decorative call making. With his ability to cross back and forth on both the turkey and duck sides of this competition, he made a huge impact on this contest with all of the wins he obtained, but to say his accomplishments were confined to this competition would be misleading. He is also recognized for his development of the elliptical mouthpiece for game calls, as well as the first to use aluminum reeds over 50 years ago. His ability to create game calls landed him tons of respect among hunters, and his knowledge about hunting and his desire to teach were frequently showcased in newspapers, magazines, books, as well as TV interviews all across the country. In addition to his game call abilities, he was also a well-seasoned wood carver and was highly sought after all over North America. His love for education and his need to share his knowledge and abilities were perfect for his role as a high school and college teacher, where he mentored thousands of students in biology, carpentry, jewelry making, and the art of engraving. While James is no longer with us, we would like to welcome his two sons, Shannon and Jim, to the stage to receive this award in his honor. James Yule.
A small correction. My female cousin's name was Shannon. I'm Shannon. Okay? Small correction, but I've been making it my whole life. Happy to be here with my older brother Jim, my wife Pearl, and my granddaughter Zoe, my brother Stuart's daughter Whitney with the camera, and her husband Jordan with their little boy Lazarus. Sorry about my voice. Usually when a phone rings, I pick it up. I don't look to see if it's a number I don't know. But Mark called me about 3 weeks ago, and I almost didn't pick up. And I'd heard his name before, but I hadn't met him. And so he invited us here to this event. And all I can say is, I'm not speechless, but I'm overwhelmed. You know, a couple things I'd like to echo, and I know my brother would agree with me, that if it wasn't for Christ in our life, we would be nothing. Okay? And we live in a world today that's really messed up and need that. They need him. The other thing is I'd like to honor my mother, who died 31 years ago on Valentine's Day. Now, behind every good man, there's a great woman. We know that, right? My mom was the queen of biscuits, and if it wasn't for her broom and dustpan, my dad would have had shavings up to here, right? My dad took us from Louisiana to Oregon, to Alberta, Canada, where there are lots of ducks, not many turkeys at the time. But what I would say is that call making was something that we were introduced to as babies. And there was usually a duck call laying on the coffee table somewhere. And so you learned to teeth on a duck call, okay? And then you learned to make a sound with it. And before long, you got a rating of how good you were. There's many things I could say about my dad, not a perfect man, but his artistry, as all of you folks know, was exceptional. And it was a gift from God. There's one thing I'd like to ask of you. Some of you folks have his calls, and I don't know who you are. I'd like to give you our contact information. If you could send us photographs, we'd like to put together something to honor my dad. So if you have a pencil, if you got a good memory, or you have a camera, it's yule.cp3@gmail.com. yule.cp3@gmail.com. Many years ago, my dad, when he was carving, he wasn't carving to make a living out of it. And so as a result, we never went hungry, but we weren't wealthy. And we used to say, Dad, why don't you try to sell some of those? But my dad more often would give them away to friends or would-be friends. And so I have with me here a duck call that's about 40 years old. And I know you can't see it up close, but there's an Indian on it and a dogwood and a little bit of brass on the barrel. About 11, 12 years ago, my wife and I went back to Alberta to visit and family and so on. And a fellow I went to high school with is a retired dentist. And in the community where he set up his practice, my dad needed dental work. So he went to get his teeth fixed. And he said to Keith, he said, "Son, I can't afford to pay you today, but I'll pay you." And Keith said, "Hey, just give me one of those calls, Mr. Yule." And I just gave it to him. So over 30 years later, we're visiting. We hauled some lumber up there. They don't have native hardwood and cherry, etc. Persimmon, plum. They don't have that growing up there. So anyway, the long story short is when I came home from Alberta, Keith had given this back to me. Okay, and so that's part of who my dad was. It wasn't about an industry. It was about an art. And he was forever trying to fill his life with people that valued him. And that was one way he accomplished that. So all I can say is that we are so honored to be here amongst you folks. I believe that you guys are the salt of this earth. I really do, because you understand basic things that today many people don't. Jim, you need to say something?
I certainly didn't expect to be up here talking to anybody, but I've heard some things here today that are dear to my heart. Number one, Jesus Christ. He's everything to me.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
On to Hunting Turkey Best of Box Call Sets, the John Chansey Award. Mr. Jeff Lacey, please come on up.
Hard to do his call, he's always winning.